Yeah, Goyana Tav. Hi everybody, waka. Alaika Duliuwa, Ihiagamiunga, Widaunga, Ihiagami, Nanvach Bagamiunga. I'm Yupik. My name is Mary, or my Gasaga name is, and my government given name is Mary Hostetter. My parents are Dave and Betsy Hostetter, and my grandparents on my mom's side are Nick and Mary Nawaduk. My Abba grew up downriver from where I'm currently presenting. And my grandma grew up the lake, so I am of Nunvachbuk or the Big Lake or Lake Iliamna. I am a tribal steward with the Igiugig Village Council and appreciate that you guys spent or are spending your lunch hour with us. And this is my partner in work and life, Bill Kane, and he'll give a quick introduction.
Yeah, hello all, and thanks so much, Tav, for inviting us to share some space together today. My name is Bill Kane. I am originally from the homelands of Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. I've been up in Alaska for about 10 years, and Mary and I have been together for pretty much that entire time. And I now have the immense privilege of working with the Tribal Stewardship Office here in Igiugig and supporting the Bristol Bay Guardians initiative in the region.
So we're going to be talking to you today about how we care for our homes, and I'm just getting our screen up and running. When we think about how we care for our homes, this is not new for our Indigenous peoples. Our Indigenous peoples have been caring for the homes we live in relationship with for time immemorial. Just here in Igiugig, downriver, one of our old ancestral sites is about 8,000 years old. That's over 320 generations of people living in deep relationship with the land, water, skies, and our more than human relatives. And I'm sure the same is for all of our communities across Bristol Bay and Alaska. So when we think about what we will be talking about kind of at the later part of our presentation here and about the term guardians, guardians is not new to our people. We have been doing this for a very long time. One of the things that I want to also make a mention about with here in Guardians is that Guardians is not a fully comprehensive term of what we do to take care of our home, each other, our lands, waters, and more than human relatives. It is pale in comparison to what we actually do because we weave in our languages, we weave in our culture and our traditions as we consider taking care of our lands, waters, skies, and more than human relatives and our communities. So just want to say that here, the term guardian is also including of sentinels, rangers, natural resource departments, community IT people. How we care for our home can be as broad as every single job that we have in our communities right now. Another note that I'd like to make is all of this media is taken locally. It's either taken by Bill, myself, or one of our community media folks who is up in Pedro Bay. So we're going to be talking to you today about how the Ihiagagamute take care of our home, but also how that inspired what we're trying to build into the Bristol Bay Guardians. With that is a huge sigh of uncertainty. Probably every single one of us has read the news or has seen the executive orders that are coming out of the current administration. And that just really brings into this space a degree of unknown as we look toward the future, because a lot of the federal funding that we're working with is federal. So whether that's our current positions now or the grant that we're going to be talking to you about, Bristol Bay Guardians, which is in coordination with the NOAA CRRC Climate Regional Resilience Challenge Grant. So please remember that as we're going through these different steps, because we don't know what the future looks like. We're taking it day by day, sometimes hour by hour, and we're really hopeful that we're able to continue to work in this space, because caring for our home as the entirety of Bristol Bay, as one of the last strongholds of sockeye salmon in the world, now is more important than ever that we're able to really bring in our spirits, our souls, and our energies as we continue to steward this amazing place we call home. So I'm going to back up to 2020 when Igiugig published its adaptation assessment. So that's actually really what inspired us to be here today. We had support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Tribal Climate Resilience Grants that helped us create what we are doing today. Within our adaptation assessment, we had identified relatives of concern that we're focusing on. And then when we come up to 2023 to now, we're developing what we think a national, or a rather a regional Indigenous Guardians network might look like, which is right now called Bristol Bay Guardians. We recognize fully that our entire region has not united under this name, and we fully expect at the end of this 5-year grant, if it continues, that we will reassess how we feel about that name. We want to make sure that we're being very adaptable to how we think about these different words. The adaptation assessment was supported by Department of Interior and BIA, but it also had the support of our Yaqik Village Council and SNAP, Scenarios Network for Alaska and Arctic Planning. A lot of what was in our adaptation assessment is different climate models that we might expect with this changing climate as we're experiencing now. And I hope that Dillingham and everybody else on this call is experiencing the colds, but 2 days ago it was well above freezing. And right now it's probably -1, which is right around where I think it should be for this time of year. So they really helped us look at different climate scenarios, whether it's drying out of our lands, waters, other areas, or what our wildfire risk might be. One of the most important things to tell this story is maps. So this is our traditional territory here of the Iliamna, here in this kind of shaded area. But every other color that you see on here is a different, quote, land owner. So we've got, here is DNR, the blue is DNR, the yellow is BLM, orange are native corporations. You can maybe see that there are tiny little red markers here around Yaqik. Those are individual native allotments. Purple here is the National Park and Preserve. So when we think about how we care for our home, here is the land that is technically, quote, owned by our native corporation, but here is our traditional territory. Specifically, one of the areas that we have a lot of different areas that we have gone to in the past is the Kukaklik region. Here you can see these black dots. These are place names. These are recorded place names of different places. Very specifically, I know this one in particular is Telerik, and that means trout in Yuchtun. So the language of the land, whether it's Yupik, Dena'ina, or Sugpiaq, it really helps us understand how we utilized our land and how we lived in relationship and moved across it in our ancestral times. But when we think about the National Park and Preserve, Bureau of Land Management, or DNR, those are state and federal potential partners that we can look to build relationship with, to figure out how we might be able to steward this entire area instead of just this part, because that's a tiny part and it also can't be disconnected from the rest of our lands as every other part of land within Bristol Bay. So this is our vulnerability assessment. This is what came out of our adaptation assessment. You can see here, this is sensitivity levels across the top and adaptability levels down toward the bottom. If you come over to this corner here, this is the least able to adapt and the most vulnerable to the different climatic changes that are happening. Here we have our salmonberry or the cloudberry or Atsalchbiak and the sockeye salmon. So those two relatives, very specifically, we wanted to address immediately and foremost because they are most in red here. Salmon berries have a slightly lower vulnerability than the sockeye salmon, but the sockeye salmon has a little bit more adaptability than the salmon berry, but they both are relatives that we live in deep relationship with, especially in the summertime. So what came next after we identified those relatives of concern? We did a literature review, and that is essentially we scoured the internet for any kind of terms with Lake Iliamna, sockeye, or salmon berries to really understand what gaps existed. And there, especially for our sockeye salmon, there are a couple. But salmon berries aren't very well known. There have been a lot of studies that have been done kind of in Norway in that area because they have salmon berries there. They're different a little bit, but they're very similar. We identified the need for baseline data. And what is baseline data? It is the kind of the foundational first data that we're collecting on something. For Igiugig, at the very least, the data that we're collecting on our salmon berries is the first data of its kind. So that creates a foundation for us to understand how our relative is doing now so that we might be able to compare how they are doing later. We identified potential partners. Right now, our strongest partners, rather in the past, our strongest partners have been federal, university, and philanthropic. I'll add nonprofit in there as well. But we have been building and cultivating these relationships so that we might be able to also help create a roadmap of how we were able to access these different opportunities or trainings or knowledge. We applied to different federal funding programs and we created an iterative monitoring plan. So that iterative is a word that means it's ever changing. You're always looking at it again and you're adapting like our people always have. And this text was a really big help. This is edited by Carol Ann Woody, and it has about 14 chapters talking about all of our different relatives. And at the end of every chapter is recommended research or gaps. And so there were a lot of really good pieces of information in here for us as we look toward what our seal population in Lake Iliamna is doing, what different experiences that our trout might be having and how we might be able to create a research idea or collect data collection around that. So we had this question for our salmon berries. How are Atsalukbiat or salmon berries, the plural of salmon berries, being impacted by a changing climate? Here in Igiugig, what we're experiencing is a couple things. A general drying out of our swamplands. So where our salmon berries grow, they are getting a little bit drier. So in some areas, our salmonberry patches are migrating to wetter areas, or they're being pushed out by shrubs. So shrubs like the IUT, you can see some here, tundra tea, or the dwarf birches here, and there are dwarf willows as well. And you can see these grasses. So when these are competing for the different nutrients and different what we'll call maybe ground resources for our relatives, the Atsalukbiak, we don't really know how those impact them. So we really want to understand how they're interacting. So working with Erica Wood, she's here in the yellow cap, we created a monitoring plan. Here we are making a transect, so a 10 meter or 30-foot straight line across a sample site. This is one of our sample sites. And what we're doing, you can see this kind of square. It doesn't look very square from here, but it's a PVC square, 1 meter square, that we're going to place randomly across this transect, record those numbers, and then return to those same meter by meter squares every year. And we're going to compare how many flowers there are in the spring to how many berries actually set. So how many of those flowers turn to berries. We're also going to understand how many different kinds of plant relatives are within that sample site and what kind of, or rather how many of those different plant relatives there are and what kind there are. Sometimes you can see this area has a lot of mosses. That's really awesome, but maybe a site over here might not have nearly as many mosses, and how do those two grow comparatively? And how are our sites changing over time? This year will be our second full year creating this monitoring plan. So as we look toward the summer, we're hopeful to get Erica Wood back up here so we can go through those sites again and have community training opportunities as we've had here. Here are a couple of our youth who are still in school who are interested in wanting to learn about this. And I'm sharing this as examples and maybe as inspiration for your communities, because I know that whether it's Atsalchbiak or Churat or Dumarlit, the blueberries or cranberries or other berries you might have, Dengachbit, the blackberries, we all care about the berries we eat. And so how might we be able to really collect this information if something is being impacted? Here's one of those transects. We're counting flowers. So this is a little bit of springtime here or early summer where the flowers are coming out and doing a relative assessment here. Our other monitoring relative is a site. So this is up in Knutson Beach in Pedro Bay. Here is red development, REDD development. So the salmon egg nests that salmons create. You can sometimes see them wagging their tails in the gravel, and they're creating their nests where they'll lay their babies, where they'll lay their eggs. And so this has been one of the most awesome relationship builders for me with our relative, the Sayak, and this is sockeye salmon, because we're using drones as an opportunity to collect this really awesome data. So we are piloting a drone survey of spawning salmon, so spawning saite, because Alaska Department of Fish and Game no longer had the budget to do aerial surveys in the upper Kwijak watershed. We've seen this for a little while, that different agencies might not have the budget to keep a project afloat that has been very important for our region. This is one of them. Another one of them is the smolt out migration project that happened on the Kwijak River that is no longer happening and hasn't been happening since 2019. So now we're at 2025, and this summer we won't likely have a smolt out migration project. So that's over 6 years that we won't have that data. And that begs the question, at least for us, like, what is data? And how might what we want to know be different than a Western science organization who really wants to have comparability across years when having a general idea of biomass exiting the Kwijak River into the Bristol Bay is really important to us. But I'll get back to adult salmon. So by investing in local capacity, we're able to support 2 local drone pilots one in Pedro Bay, one in Kokonak. Myself and Bill are pilots, and we have index sites across the Lake Iliamna that we're visiting. We try to visit them every 2 weeks, but some of the sites are remote and they require some long travel. And we weren't able to get to the Telerex mid, upper, and lower as frequently as we wanted to this summer because of weather. But so what we're doing here is we're training drone pilots to conduct aerial surveys of spawning salmon tributaries or beaches. Here is a lagoon at Lower Telerik, and this is one of my favorite photos because what the sockeye are doing in this photo is so crazy to me. I sent this picture around and I asked some folks what they think might be happening, and this is a pretty big lagoon. So when it blows east wind, which is this east west, what is happening is that there are waves being created underneath on the substrate of the water. So the substrate of this lagoon must have waves on it, is what we were shared, and the sockeye are aligning to those waves. So that is just so incredibly amazing. And again, being able to build my relationship with my relative, the sockeye, has been through drone flying, has been so amazing. So we can do a lot of different things with these different drone flights. So we're essentially flying up tributaries, following all the different curves, and we can consider the health of the stream, the vegetation on the side, see whether or not there's erosion that's being experienced. But there are also similar efforts in the Dillingham region. Norm Van Vactor is doing some drone surveys on the Wood River that we're really hopeful to build a partnership with as we look toward how we care for our relatives across Bristol Bay. Curry Cunningham, who is with the University of Washington, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Fisheries Research Institute, or the Alaska Salmon Program, is one of our mentors in this. This is Brandon Jensen and myself, and we're getting a rundown of how we might be flying our drone mission. So there's a specific height we're flying at, a specific speed. There are different ways that you can get your drone missions aligned so that you can create really comprehensive orthomosaics, which are essentially really big pictures of many multiple small pictures stitched together with 70 to 80% overlap. A lot of that is a little bit in the weeds, and I'm happy to ever have a sidebar conversation about that. But it has been a lot of really awesome learning over this last summer. This coming summer will be our second summer, so we're really hopeful that the wrinkles we ironed out last summer are figured out this summer. So how to fly those streams, how to get the 70 to 80% overlap to really create strong orthomosaics with no gaps. One of our big partners is the Indigenous Sentinels Network. Maybe some of you in the room know about them. They are responsible for well, that sounds, they host rather the application Citizen Sentinel, Fish Map App, Skipper Science. These are all different applications that they support. But this is a way for us to actively take observations, whether we're out in the field collecting drone surveys. We have a drone survey form that we can create. It shares what location you're at, what photo numbers you might have, so that when we come back to our field office in Igiugig here, we're able to quickly upload that. And it's more efficient. And I really like finding those efficiencies within our work. So we're going to be talking about Indigenous Guardians, and Indigenous Guardians is out of Canada, first of all. I'll read this quote. Indigenous Guardians help Indigenous nations honor their responsibility to care for the lands, waters. They serve as the eyes and ears on traditional territories. We've also heard right there, we are the mucklucks and moccasins on the ground, but Indigenous Guardians, which again is not new, our Indigenous peoples have been doing this for a very long time, but some experiences and events happened that really disconnected us from that responsibility. We are looking toward our relatives in Canada as a role model to create our program, which is how we care for our home and how we build relationships with external entities to ensure that we are complementing what everybody might be doing and amplifying it rather than recreating the wheel or doing work in silos. So a lot of this is network building. How do we ensure that this organization and this organization are connected so that we might know all of the efforts that are happening across our home? Guardians preserve language, culture, and tradition. This is one of the biggest tenets of what Guardians do because our culture and our languages are so incredibly important to us. So as we look toward how do we involve our language, culture, and tradition, it is uplifting opportunities like this, where this is one of our larger families processing fish. There are actually two of them in their relative families. And then supporting our dance group or our language group. Really, we look for opportunities to support these different experiences because all of it really does matter. Reconnecting to our dance, our language, our lands and waters is really important to when we think about the health of our communities and ourselves. Guardians create jobs. Guardians invest in community through training opportunities and and through those different partnerships with federal or state agencies, we're able to really lean on them for training opportunities that haven't been open to us before. So the Dunker training is one of those opportunities we really want to uplift. That is usually for federal agencies, but we're really exploring with the National Park Service how we might be able to access that because every single one of us flies in small planes pretty frequently. Here is Tatiana Zakar. She's one of the folks that we hire in the summertime to operate boats. She's an incredibly knowledgeable boat driver, as well as she has knowledge of this river that rivals, I think, a lot of other folks. Here is Bill, and he's taking some drone footage right now. And this is myself learning how to do some water quality monitoring from a guardian in Canada. So all of these next slides are potential job opportunities for our people. Guardians monitor our lands, waters, and our relatives. So here are our sockeye salmon. This is at Mid-Tilleric where we are flying a drone survey. This is one of those jobs, becoming a drone pilot and doing these different surveys, whether it's spawning salmon surveys, erosion monitoring, or collecting really amazing footage of our homelands to tell a story. Those are job opportunities. These are the seals up in Pedro Bay. So this is a picture from Brandon Jensen with his drone. He is the other pilot, like I mentioned. But we're able to collect footage on our seal relatives. It's a lot less invasive. It isn't nearly as time intensive or expensive. But how we care for our homes can include doing drone surveys. And this is up at Gibraltar. Here are a couple of our relatives, the dakukak, the bear, and the sait or sockeye salmon. This is where Gibraltar is also one of our other drone sites that we're working on. Guardians monitor cultural and ancestral sites. If we were to walk up this hill, you can see this trail a little bit and go off of the screen. This is our oldest community ancestral site. So this is the site I was talking about that has over 8,000 years of known archaeological data. And what that tells me is that, okay, archaeological data says that we've been there for 8,000 years, but we didn't just get dropped off there. So we're living in this region for a lot longer than that. And that requires a deep relationship and respect for our great mother, which sustains us. Guardians patrol and document observations. Whenever we're out, whether it's personally or with work in the fields, we're taking observations. So this is Kaskanak, which is one of our main areas where we hunt in the summer, in the fall time. And we're not the only ones who hunt there. So how can we ensure that we are living in relationship with this place in a good way, where we're not over extracting or over harvesting any of our relatives? Guardians build relationship with other guardians. So these three folks here are guardians in Canada that we shadowed in April. We were really excited to be able to share space with these folks. This is Robbie, who is their elder guardian, Lisa and Tanya. And to hear each one of them express why they are guardians in their home communities was incredibly heartwarming and inspiring, because every single one of their answers was the same. They want to ensure that the ways that they experience their life and their relationship with the lands, waters, skies, and more than human relatives remains for their children and grandchildren. And that's why we're doing what we're doing now too, is that we see these different opportunities, these different industrial activities that might be happening. And we want to ensure that we're being the responsible stewards that we are in these spaces to ensure that our next generations can live and love these lands and waters as we have. Guardians build relationships with state and federal agencies. So I'm going to, I can keep really talking more and more and more about all of these, but I'll maybe fasten it up because I do want to talk about Bristol Bay Guardians a bit. This is a partnership with the USGS, and Bill has been very instrumental in this. And this is Abe, who is helping with this. We're essentially taking velocity measurements right now of the river, and Tatiana Zakar is the boat driver there. But we were, through the awesome work that Bill has been able to do with USGS, we've been able to reinstall a defunct USGS river gauge at the Kwijak River here. A priority site by USGS in partnership with the Nature Conservancy has been funded for 5 years, and it gives us really informational data that we can use to understand how much water is exiting the lake, how fast it's going, the temperature, etc. And that's been a really awesome opportunity to build relationship, and why relationships matter, because instead of Abe coming out to address any kind of equipment failure or malfunction, Bill and I can do it. So right now, we've been able to really decrease their operational costs by building this relationship in community. One of the bigger aspects of our of Bill's work, who does a lot of the relationship building with the federal and state agencies and is very appreciated. I do most of the talking, which is why we see what we're seeing now. But so the National Park Service is one of the partners that we're building deep relationship with, because we have the Katmai National Park and Preserve that's just south in our homelands. Through this partnership, we've been able to uplift a restart of our caribou hunt of the Kukaklik caribou herd, which is separate than the Mulchatna. So that has been through building relationship, through really investing time and energy, spirit energy, I think, into this space. In October or November, we had Mark Sturm, not this guy, but a couple other people from Katmai National Park, and preserve, come out to Ogiagik for a week and share that time with us, which is really important as we think about relationship building. It isn't just a black and white relationship during work hours. It is also building that resiliency of understanding one another. This is a USDA partnership that helps us collect data on our snow. I'll skip through that one because I think that I'd like to leave some time for questions. Guardians build relationships with research institutions. We kind of spoke about University of Washington earlier. But what we want to talk about right now is really Bristol Bay Guardians' vision and action. So the Bristol Bay Guardians grant through NOAA, through their Climate Regional Resilience Challenge, is in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. So the Nature Conservancy is our administrative partner. They're hosting all of the reporting burden as well as the administerial aspects of the grant, and also ensuring that this region-wide effort isn't hosted just in Ogiagik because we do want to build this outward. So I also want to say that there's a huge mountain of salt that comes with this. You know, the saying, take it with a grain of salt, where I'm giving you a mountain of salt right now. We're really unsure about this funding right now. So we're really hopeful that this will maintain, but we just really have no idea what the future will bring. I will talk about this in what our plan is, but please be gracious with us if that plan doesn't come to fruition because of external activities that are happening that are completely out of our control. This 5-year grant is to establish a foundation and a network for sustainable programming across Bristol Bay. So we want to be able to create those mycelial networks, the connections between our region through the different entities that might work in this space, through the different communities and tribes who have interests and concerns, and really uplift our Indigenous communities' concerns in these spaces because we are the original scientists. We are the original people who observe and adapt and are flexible. Within that is the sharing about Guardians. We really want to bring to our communities the inspiration that I have received from Canada and hopefully reflect that to our communities where we can see ourselves in this. We have experienced as Indigenous communities, the federal or state government coming in and saying, this is a new project, we want you to do this. That's not what Guardians is about. We want each of our communities to see themselves within that and be inspired to be able to start taking those initiatives in their own responsibility, but with the help of this network that we're creating. We want to create that roadblock or that roadmap, sorry, that we are able to, sorry, I just got caught up in roadblock. That's not what I want to do. Roadmap for how did we get here and what can you do to do that as well? So that's why I shared the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Grant. That's how we are able to interact in this space. Again, not sure what that looks like for these next 4 or 8 years. So we're going to set this foundation for learning and knowledge sharing. That roadmap, again, is really important for us as we look toward a future of funding these different very important initiatives. But we want to share everything that we're learning, and which is why we're sharing about all of our different efforts that we have been going on. We're cultivating relationships with tribes, federal agencies, and nonprofits to create more meaningful land relationship planning opportunities. So we'll use, and you've heard me speak about our relatives, not as resources, but as kin. You'll also hear me use land relationship planning instead of land management or natural resource management. Words are incredibly important. When we commodify and distill our relatives into something that can be used and not respected, we're really taking away that relationship and that reciprocity of sustaining us and how do we give back to them. So within this too is we have 2 separate fellows. One of them is a seal fellowship and another is a salmon fellowship. I'll talk about those in another slide. But these are hosted through NOAA. And that's to support a literature review of both seals and salmon and create essentially an annotated bibliography, which is taking scientific articles essentially having the spark notes of them for the annotated biography so that I might be able to go read it and say, oh, wow, this is really cool, but this might not be pertinent right now. And a lot of this also is in coordination with the BBNA climate adaptation planning. They also got a NOAA grant from, or they also got a grant from NOAA, and we're going to be coordinating with them with their climate adaptation templates that they're hopeful to create, because the next logical step in our minds is guardians. And that means that we're also coordinating with entities like ANTHC and the Aleut community of St. Paul, who also receive these kinds of grants to support workforce development, but also uplift guardianship and how we care for our homes. Would you like to say anything? Here are those two different opportunities for smolt and seals. I'm happy to share with you the links if that's helpful, or Tav, I can share you the links there on the NOAA's website right now. Again, and even today, Bill and I thought, well, do we just take this slide out? Do we hide this slide? Because we're not really sure what's happening in that space. We wanted to share it with you because there is that potential. It will continue to be supported. But these are two different opportunities to support what we're doing now. And we're also being mindful of how do we do this in a really equitable way, recognizing that our Indigenous peoples also need to have these opportunities, and our allies have a space to step up as well and really support the work that is going on, because it does take all of us to care for our home. Another one of the opportunities that we wanted to share, which is not supported by us, but we recognize that as the network, we want to share training opportunities. Here's a GIS opportunity in Dillingham at the Bristol Bay campus, March 17th through 21st. Leilani Lures is involved in it, and also, what is that woman's name with yesterday? Sydney Thielke is involved as well. And I just wanted to share why GIS is cool. So it's geospatial information systems. You can create maps of your community of fire threats and risks, trails and different access points, or your traditional territories. You can monitor, you can use drones and upload this data and monitor erosion, our more than human relatives, our vegetation. And you can get even more creative than that. These are just the very small things I know about, and I'm only dipping my toes into GIS right now. So the applications for GIS within our communities are really strong, especially considering that some of this work might have already been done in silos, but some of this work might not have been done in our communities. So how can we uplift our people to become really inspired in these spaces? Within that, it is offering a belief and encouragement, but also the ability to make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. We're always learning. And when we make positions or jobs scary by not being able to make mistakes, I think that really like hinders our people to want to involve themselves, because there isn't that humanity that's involved. Here are some other connected efforts, and I'm actually going to let Bill talk about this slide.
Yeah, so within kind of the guardianship work here in Iqaluit, we sort of see the development of this happening at the hyper-local level here in Iqaluit, kind of piloting some of these initiatives. And we've moved into calling our tribal stewardship department and aspects of it a tribal stewardship lab, in that we sort of see our work as experimental in nature at this moment, in navigating some of these new relationships that are actually collaborative, where in the past that has not been the case, and also working to kind of bridge this gap that exists often between agencies, research institutions, and tribes. So kind of the interstitium of all of that. And one of those dynamics that really came out of course, our initial climate change adaptation efforts is the growing existential threat of wildland fire presence within the Bristol Bay region here. And so we've been able to partner with Alaska Venture Fund's wildfire team, who is comprised primarily of folks that have moved away from state or federal agency wildland firefighting response positions, to really address tribal needs and meet tribes where they're at with regards to preparedness, capacity, and equipment available within community, and try to cut through a lot of the bureaucratic red tape that's usually associated with firefighting within communities, and actually get appropriate equipment and training out to these communities. Specifically on that note, we stepped away to provide or to share space with you today from what we're calling Fire Gap training hosted here in Iliamna this week, which is the first of its kind type of training hosted primarily by Alaska Venture Fund's wildfire team. They're out here right now with the majority of the community, working with them in structural and wildland firefighting preparedness and response measures. Again, really meeting community where they're at and addressing the equipment needs that we might be looking for, funding opportunities, those type of dynamics that are otherwise just not really, they haven't been historically, I guess, able to be accessed by a lot of our tribes. And so there's a lot of other efforts here that we're really focused on, and they're all connected through broader partnerships, either through universities or nonprofits and agencies with a presence in the region. Um, and so we're really looking forward to continue to build out these initiatives through community-based monitoring applications in the coming seasons here. And I'll leave it at that, I think, for the other connected efforts.
Yeah, we're learning today about how do you respond to a lithium battery fire. And typically when you are in Anchorage or maybe even larger community, I think they tell you don't get out. But for some of our communities, we don't have that option. Like, how do we respond to this if somebody experiences that? But so that has been really awesome. A lot of hands-on training, which is really beneficial for us. But so we've talked a little bit about the small migration dynamics. We've heard one of the things that we're really interested in is hearing our local observations. And one of those is our resident fish and our resident fish populations are experiencing some challenges. We've heard some scary things about our rainbow trout, grayling, and our sculpin or the bullheads. And just really want to consider those as the entire food chain matters. Freshwater seal population, we've expressed that NOAA is helping with that through a fellowship. Erosion monitoring using drones as a potential tool, and water quality monitoring, ensuring that our waters are still safe and cool enough for our salmon to live in. Um, Help us build a foundation for a durable Guardians network. I know that some of you are in there. I think I recognize some folks in the Dillingham room. You've seen this presentation before. I know Tab has seen it a couple times, so I appreciate you listening to it for maybe sometimes the fifth or sixth time. And I have made a comment to myself that I'd like to change some pictures so at least there's some new content in there. This QR code will bring you to the Bristol Bay Guardians website. It has a brief video that's about 6 minutes long that you're welcome to check out. But again, really just trying to build in this cohesivity across this amazing place that we call home. And here are our partners. United Tribes of Bristol Bay has been a big partner as we move forward. NIFWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, is supporting us right now, but you can read the rest of them. And I want to open it up for questions, and I hope we have enough time if there are some questions. So Guyana.
Thank you, Mary. Bill. Oh, very bad. You're gonna have to shout super loud, Fritz.
Mary Fritz Johnson, thank you for this. I enjoyed it the second time.
Awesome. Thanks, Fritz.
Regarding, in the beginning, you mentioned Caroline Woody's work has provided some direction. I'm curious, is that a book, a monograph, or where can you find it?
Happy to.
I think that you're asking where we might be able to find the Carol Ann Woody book. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Bill has a really good answer to that.
Yeah, it's Fritz, it's a pretty massive textbook. It is a wonderful resource. It was published in 2018. A lot of the BBs were responsible for funding that initiative. And it's available, I think, on Amazon, actually, if you just search for that book. But happy to actually follow up and send you a direct link of where to buy it. I think it costs around 80 bucks or so. But it is a heck of a resource, and really hopeful that we can help support kind of updates to that text moving forward as well.
And Bill, I'll just jump in as well. So BBEDC donated 10 of those textbooks to WASTE, Western Alaska Interdisciplinary Science Conference, to give us awards and thank yous. And Alaska Sea Grant also bought 5 of them for last year's WASTE that didn't arrive in time. So we've got about 15 of those textbooks in the other building.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or online?
So on one of the Facebook posts, there was a question by a community that I caught a little bit late. But the question was on whose land when we care for our lands. And I didn't answer that on Facebook. I'm not a big Facebooker. That's probably why. But I just wanted to express that the lands that our people live on, that we interact with every single day. And I know that there are now Western concepts of land ownership that really maybe are contrary to our Indigenous ideas of land and the sharing and that ownership which we don't own. But it is the lands that we live in relationship with, whether you're out berry picking or hunting, we live on those lands, we live in that relationship. So it is expansive of all of the different territories that our people interact with. And that is what I would have said on the Facebook post had I been a commenter, but just wanted to share that this also isn't just for the Native Corporation bounds of Bristol Bay Native Corporation. It is all of the different lands that we interact with that we love so incredibly deeply. So just wanted to share that.
Mary, I really appreciate that and you addressing that comment. I also never respond to people on Facebook, the trolls on there, except to say, come and see firsthand. But I think that was a great answer. Yeah. Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
April, this is the first time I've seen your presentation, and I really appreciated it. Curious, now, one of your sponsors or one of the people work with is Chris Bayo, is that correct?
Oh,
We just started building that relationship out a little bit more. I met Chris at WASC maybe 2 years ago now, and became familiar with some of the community-based monitoring kind of around erosion, I suppose, in Dillingham and the Chigniks. And at that point, we made a commitment to touch base as our capacity kind of grew, and as we wanted to build out a better partnership for erosion monitoring, especially using drones at the community level here in the Lakes region. And so actually just last week, we had a really productive conversation with Chris about what that might look like this coming season. So yeah, I appreciate the question, the update, or the inquiry there. Anything more specific with regards to Chris?
Well, not really, just that I know he's done a lot of monitoring of the erosion, on the bluff right by Kanakanak. So I'd be interested in seeing what he's doing in conjunction with what you guys are doing. April, do you go by Mary as well?
There are 3 Hostetter sisters, and I hear that we look almost exactly alike. We've been asked if we're triplets before. I am Mary, the oldest. April, who is the one who joined you at the legislative class, is the middle. And then Tess is our youngest sister, and she lives in Juneau.
Yeah, because you guys look so much alike.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
I thought you were April, and I'm going, why are they called?
Oh.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We get it a lot. I think, yeah.
And just talking about Chris, his team did a presentation, one of our first lunch and learns ever, about erosion monitoring here in Bristol Bay. And next month, we have Chug Young Tribe doing a presentation about erosion monitoring here as well. So a big topic.
Yeah, I'm actually curious with the Chug Young Tribe, are they working with Chris too?
I don't know. They just
Okay.
asked if they could do a lunch and learn on it.
Awesome. Well, we'll plan on being at that one. We really appreciate the lunch and learns, and yeah, and we're just really excited to share what we're learning, but also uplift the amazing things that are happening in our region. So we really appreciate the camaraderie, but also the relationship building and just being able to care for our home together.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you both. Appreciate it.